The assumption that AI might lead to, say, better diagnosis of disease and then better treatment, that's predicated on the assumption that these AI systems actually give us the right answer. And right now, these systems just come up with things that sound plausible, and they often they make up things that are completely untrue. If you were following things in the United States, there was a woman named Elizabeth Holmes who tried to start a huge company that was going to do blood diagnostics, and it was all fraud. You can imagine someone like that selling these systems that they send out into the field to do diagnosis, and where it's actually not getting the right answer. Which is that it may be that when it's constrained to make sure that it gives us the correct answers, these machine systems might be able to do things that people used to do, and that would reduce the demand for people to do those jobs. And this could be harmful for some period of time for wages and income. I think this is a very real concern. There is a separate concern that some people in Silicon Valley have, that AI will become so smart that it will become our rulers and lock us in the basement and make us into prisoners or something. I don't know how they get to that kind of part of their thinking. I noticed at the bank, a lot of people want to worry about problems that we don't yet have, because then they don't have to rely on any facts. They can just make them up. Well, it's going to be like this and that. I think we need to focus on the problems we have. But the problems we have involve income inequality, which has been increasing, especially in the United States. Really serious, something's gone seriously wrong with our ability to translate more GDP per capita into longer, successful lives. If you look at the United States compared to South Korea or European countries, for a couple of decades, the United States has been stagnant in terms of life expectancy, while South Korea, for example, has just gone powering up with longer and longer lives. But for a couple of decades, we were already falling behind the progress you see all around the world. So something's gone seriously wrong in the United States on this dimension, and we need to understand what it is. I think the China shock, the erosion of manufacturing jobs, is a candidate here. I also think that it's possible that a dishonest businessman actually contributed to this as well by adopting a business model of getting people addicted to opioid-based painkillers. And that this has really had profound effects in terms of loss of life, loss of ability to function, addiction. So this is a more general warning that other technologies, like just new pharmaceuticals, not just software, new technologies can sometimes be beneficial, sometimes can be very harmful, and we need governments that are strong enough to say, oh, you can use the good ones, but no, you can't have a business where you addict people and kill them to make billions of dollars. And this is a more common problem than we like to admit. If you think back to the 1980s, we had a class of chemical compounds called chlorofluorocarbons. The people who developed them and were selling them in chemical companies were not bad people. They weren't trying to, do something like this opioid guy did. But it turned out that those chemicals were destroying the ozone layer and really threatening life on Earth. So at that time, the government of the United States, under Ronald Reagan, said, no, you can't sell chemicals that are going to destroy life on Earth. And other countries around the world had governments that also said, yeah, we're going to agree to that and do that. I'm worried that our governments have lost that capacity to say no to things that are things that are harmful. But to go back to the narrower question, even if we can say no to the opioids, we're still going to face this problem of some workers who've had stagnant wages and living lives of despair. And I think as professionals in economics, we need to take much more seriously the question of what practical measures can countries use to achieve at least a kind of a stable distribution of income, so that everybody is seeing some percentage increase on average in their income, rather than having a few go surging ahead and the rest be left behind. I think we've often paid lip service to this and often said something like, well, a government could just use taxes and transfers to achieve income inequality. Politically, it's very difficult to achieve transfers in any democratic society. And we need to be much more I think, attentive to the practical details of how can we make sure that we create social environments where everybody feels like they have a stake in the progress that the good discoveries could bring. We have to accept kind of imperfect solutions because we have not just economic constraints, but political constraints. I think one thing that pushes us toward is the idea of, instead of just an income transfer or a guaranteed income, what we could do is reward work. And more generally, I think we could also reward work for people at the lowest levels of the income distribution. We measure income, so we should be subsidizing somebody who's just on the margin between, oh, I don't want to bother to try and get one of those low-wage jobs or getting the job. I think this is worth doing, partly because work, much more so than we realize in our usual conversations, work is like school. People acquire skill on the job, and it's kind of very basic skills. It's not calculus, but it's things like working with colleagues, showing up on time, being good about communicating what you find with others, just very basic social interaction, teamwork kinds of skills. So we should think of work is like school, and we should be subsidizing, encouraging, mandating work just the way we do with schools. And I think we should also have a broad notion of work. We might be able to mandate and encourage this through private sector jobs. If we can't do it there, I think we should think about trying to create government jobs where we just pay out of the tax revenue for the work that people do. There are so many things. And if you think back to one very big example of this in the United States, we introduced a social security system in the 1930s, which radically reduced poverty amongst the elderly. It took a long time for its effects to play out, but it's very popular, and it's really had a big impact on poverty in a particular demographic, the elderly. I've thought about this a little bit in the context of homelessness, which is something we see in many cities in the United States right now. Part of the thinking is, well, if we just provided more support, like funding to give them a place to live, that would be good, and there's some truth in that. But I think we should also be thinking about, how do we get people who are homeless back into jobs? Now, some of them might do a job that's different from a traditional job. Imagine it was like, there are people who, for example, go through trash bags in New York, collect the cans that you can turn in and get a deposit refund. So it's a kind of a pay for work done. But it's also something where if somebody just feels like they can't work on one day, they don't have to do it that day, they can do it on other days. I think we should be thinking about things like, couldn't there be like public sanitation, like street sweeping or litter collection or other public jobs? And couldn't these even be organized so that people could work when they feel like working, don't work when they don't for whatever reason, and just be more flexible, but get them into this position where, one, they're contributing something in exchange for something that they get, and two, they're just practicing those social skills, those work skills that that will make them stronger. So I think we could have systems like that ready to accommodate. If there are a lot more people who need a job and some structure in their lives, then you do it. And if the market's working fine, then you don't have to do it. We did this during the 1930s with a program called the Civilian Conservation Corps, where it was mostly men, but young men were just sent out into forests to thin the forests. We got a lot of forests that are burning because they got way too much wood. And we could pay people to thin the forests again and be flexible about how people move in and out of these jobs. But the point is that we're going to have to be creative and do things that we haven't tried recently.